Today we're welcoming Dr. Marissa Heisel to the show. I'm very excited about this. She talks about many different holistic modalities which are important. She's invested in midwifery and she talks about reclaiming your power. So this is a very important message to get out today, and very excited to welcome Dr. Marissa Heisel. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. How are you?
I'm doing great. Like I said, this information is very important, and the more that we can take back our power and reclaim our health, like just the better off we're going to be and be able to be of service. So I'm very curious myself. What is your story, and how did you get into this place to helping other people the way that you are?
Great question. So I started out, my adult education was in chiropractic actually, and I became a chiropractor back in 1999. But even then, when I was graduating, the school that I went to was very typical chiropractic. You adjust the spine, you adjust the joints. It was very biomechanical. And I understood that health somehow, I was raised in a very typically medical family, lots of medical doctors, had all sorts of digestive health issues as a kid and never got help with them in the medical system. And it was through nutrition and naturopathic care that my health started to change. And I went into chiropractic, and it was this very straight-laced biomechanical model. And I understood that health, somehow I knew that health was so much more than that. So even when I started practicing as a young person in my late 20s in 1999, I was always searching for the physical, chemical, emotional, spiritual aspects of health. And what I came to understand is that all of our experiences through all of our lives, all of them, including the ones potentially from before we were born and our family histories, that genealogy, all of that impacts us. Our experiences physically and chemically and emotionally, the breakups, the trauma, all of that creates who we are in the present day. And ignoring that and thinking that symptoms today just, came out of the blue, you're suddenly sick. I started describing it as the body speaks to us in whispers, and we ignore them a lot of the time until the body's pretty much throwing bricks at our head and we can't ignore it any longer. Sometimes, like you were telling me your history a little bit, there can be something sudden, like Lyme disease is a pretty sudden onset. But for so many other things in our health, somebody dies of a heart attack in their 50s and everyone's shocked, or a sudden cancer diagnosis. But these things don't come out of nowhere. And my whole philosophy started being around, we have to take radical responsibility for our own health in every aspect and not be outsourcing it to somebody outside of us, to this external authority that tells us when we're sick and when we're healthy, and assume that that's all we need to do, that we don't need to take this radical responsibility for ourselves in really every aspect of our lives.
Awesome. I love that. I mean, it seems to me like when it comes to holistic health, a lot of things you talk about is kind of like how we got to where we are. Because I think the first step is awareness. Like, awareness is the first step to change. So if we're not aware of how we got to where we are, it's going to be really difficult to take the next step. Do I have that right?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I talk a lot about, I call it your inner compass, that ability to rely on our own internal knowing. And the examples that I often give are either of a young mother with a young baby. Baby's been fine up until now, and for some reason this week something's way off. And you go to the pediatrician or the medical doctor and they're like, everything's fine. But as a mom, when something is off with your child, because you are truly, when a child is too young to even speak, you are the greatest authority on this child. Same thing holds true for our own health all through our lives. I was telling you before about, being diagnosed well. You know that something is wrong. You know that you are not functioning at your best, that physically or emotionally or mentally something is going on, and you go and you do the testing, the blood work or the lab work, and everything's fine. And you're told that you're fine, but you're not fine. And it becomes this prolonged battle sometimes to find somebody to help us. And what I always say is we don't want to discount external advice, because sometimes it's absolutely essential. Sometimes we absolutely need, the medication or the surgery. But so often what we need to do is start to unpack whatever it is that's led us to this place, this history that we have of accidents, emotional trauma, breakups, abuse, something that we've never really dealt with. We're really good at saying, yeah, I'm sure that I've dealt with all of that. until something rears its ugly head and we realize that we haven't fully unpacked whatever it is. And we need to look at all of those things and recognize that all of these things brought us to where we are in our lives, and look at it, as I said to you before, not just, well, my philosophy is that everything happens for us, not to us, even the things that feel really crummy, and not just recognizing that it's happened for us, but express gratitude for it. Because in the midst of it, it's really hard to feel grateful when you're feeling horrible, physically or emotionally or whatever else. But when we can start to recognize that whatever this is that's happened is moving us forward into whatever that next phase of our life is meant to be, that's really powerful. And we take back our power then. We're no longer being victimized by somebody else or something else or by an illness. We've now taken back our power. And I truly believe that human beings are immensely powerful, far more than we have ever understood or been led to believe. We're really taught that we're weak and we're disempowered, and we need that outside-in approach, whether it's medicine or government or healthcare or education, that somebody outside of us is a greater authority than we are. And I think that is complete nonsense. And the phrase that I've come up with is, you are your own best medicine. In every way. Not only are you the expert in your own health, or in the case of a young mom with a young baby, in your child's health, but you are also the greatest potential for healing if you can face doing that deep inner work with bravery and with courage.
I love that. I mean, definitely on board with that. Something you talk about a lot is kind of like listening to the inner knowing in your body, right? And I feel like there's a lot of distractions in the world. There's a lot of static on the line, right? Like so many things that kind of pull us away from our inner guidance. How can we begin to start to tune into that?
Yeah, that is a great question, because not only is there a lot of static on the line all the time, but if you look at that external messaging right now, it is all fear-based. I mean, there is so much fear right now about everything, about health, about government. There's this division between people. There is this fear of the dollar. There is fear of war. There is fear. And that hijacks us. It hijacks our brains. It hijacks our ability to think clearly. When we go into fear, we are no longer standing in our own authority. And so one of the first things that I talk about is turning off that noise as much as possible. How many people do you know that are addicted to the news? I mean, addicted to it, where it's going all the time. It's not just the 6 o'clock news or the 11 o'clock news, but it's literally playing in the background. I've been in people's homes with young children where there is news playing in the background all the time. The television is always on, and these little kids are sitting there, and parents think that they're oblivious to it, but these kids are watching images of war and fighting and wrangling and shootings, and all of that impacts our capacity to think clearly and our ability to be in our hearts and coming from a place of love. And I know that sounds a little woo-woo, and I don't mean it that way, but I truly believe that when we stand in our power and we come from this wholehearted, open-hearted place, that we are almost invincible. But we have to turn off the noise. And handing our kids tablets and iPhones or whatever kind of phone you want, like a smartphone, from the time that they're tiny, and being so proud that they're able to navigate those things. I'd have parents come in for a chiropractic adjustment with tiny children, 6 months olds in car seats, and they'd put a phone in the car seat in front of the child so that they could watch YouTube images and listen to music. And by the time that child was 18 months old, they were expert at finding the music and flipping through it. Okay, so we've been enculturated and trained since about 2010, I would say, that this is normal. Right before that, we didn't really have this huge smartphone thing that really started around 2010. But what I started to notice around 2010 was the incidence of anxiety and depression shot through the roof, especially in children and mothers, because they had this supercomputer in their hands that they were accessing all the time without understanding that a child's brain neurologically is still hardwiring when they're born. It's hardwiring for years. And when you have images and information that's literally flying past your child's eyes at all times, their brains aren't capable of processing that. And so we're causing significant damage. So I'm a big follower of people who talk a lot about restricting social media access, smartphone access until children are well into their teen years as one piece of turning off that noise. And another one is just turning off the news, turning off the access to it, and going back to, I'm not talking Little House on the Prairie times, but simpler times when children would be outside and playing and exploring. And I don't know if you remember this time, but I certainly do, where you'd be out for 15 hours a day until you were called home for dinner or called in for bedtime. We've somehow replaced this. We have this massive fear of letting our kids outside, and we think that's more frightening than sitting our kids in front of devices all day long, where they're accessing information that they cannot begin to comprehend, but they're hearing it and it's still feeding their psyche and their inner neurology, and B, just the actual blue light, the EMF, the everything else that we're exposing kids to constantly. None of this, from an evolutionary perspective, we are not capable of actually dealing with these things. But we think because they're normal these days, right? Like this is the norm, and every school has these devices and every school has smart boards, and we think that this is some great leap forward. But what it's doing to our kids' imagination and creativity and development is wild. And so starting from that young age right through adulthood, we need to get more, it sounds simplistic, but back into nature, back into this simpler time. And we use these devices appropriately when we need to, as the incredible research tools that they are, but not constantly.
Definitely. It makes a lot of sense. I mean, we had this evolutionary mismatch, right? Where we still have like the same genes and all that. Like our genes require certain inputs in order to be healthy. But yeah, we have all these things. They're great things. I mean, technology is cool, but it's about intelligent use of it in a sense, because it does add a lot of stress to us, right? I mean, there's so many different things that we can be doing, but like, what is actually in alignment with our purpose, right? What is in alignment with our goals? And all these things, they can be distractions, and we tend up majoring in minor things, essentially, and not actually focus on what is important in our own life.
That is a brilliant saying, majoring in minor things. I like that a lot. I think alignment, being in alignment with our true inner knowing, with our inner selves, is one of the greatest gifts that we can give ourselves and teach to our children. Understanding who you are in this moment and giving ourselves the grace to recognize that that changes as we learn more, as we know more. One of the things that I was taught when I was a midwifery student was that we need to let go. When you're working with another woman in labor or through her pregnancy and in labor and in delivery, we need to let go as midwives of our strongly held beliefs, our deeply held beliefs, because they might not be matching what that woman wants based on her culture, her belief system, whatever it is. And so that was one of those teachings that I took with me when I left midwifery, that we need to let go of our strongly held beliefs sometimes, because we get so indoctrinated by our own belief system that we can't even hear what other people are saying, or we don't allow ourselves to learn anything new because this thing says. What we still need to be aware of is where our inner alignment lies, and to ask ourselves, is this true for me? We can learn new things, we can expand, we can change. I am a huge proponent of change in human beings. I truly believe that human animals are pretty much the only animal species that fight change, right? Because we don't want to let go of those strongly held beliefs, but we still always want to be in alignment with our true inner knowing. And we need to be asking ourselves all the time if this is true for me. And using that alignment as our North Star. Does this feel true for me? Is this in alignment with my with my heart, more than my deeply held beliefs? Because beliefs can change if we allow them to. There is so much divisiveness in the world right now, and in the last 5 years, it's been insane to watch it. And there's so little understanding or desire to understand one another. There's no debate anymore. Have you noticed that? Like, kids were taught to debate My younger daughter is 20 years old, and she was in a debating club in middle school in grade 7 and grade 8. I don't think that exists anymore, because debate means that you need to take a position and defend it without calling somebody else names, attacking them, wishing them dead, and trying to destroy their entire social media presence online. And yet somehow that's become acceptable behavior in the real world by adults. And I'm truly hopeful that, Gen Z, that younger generation, might be able to start to change that, because we lose so much when we're not able to listen to each other. It doesn't mean that we have to change who we are or let go of that deep inner sense of knowing. I think that, again, is our North Star. But I do think that we need to start working on this massive divisiveness in the world. We're being pitted against each other by, the powers that shouldn't be, in my opinion, so that we're always doing this with each other instead of looking at why are we being domineered or controlled in this way.
Yeah, makes sense. An example I like to use in terms of diet, like for beliefs, right? I feel like a lot of people were kind of eating based off of ideology, and it's interfering with our biology. Like, it's interfering with our own health, because we rather subscribe to a certain system rather than listen to our bodies. And it's hard for us to give up those beliefs because morality or whatever it is, while we started it. But until we're able to heal the internal, we can't actually do what is necessary and give us permission to actually eat something that's healthy for us. That's what I noticed as well. I mean,
I think that's huge. I think that's a very good point. I think that so much of what ails us these days is lifestyle-based and nutrition-based. I would have parents bring in young kids, everybody would get adjusted, and then the parents would tell their kids that they were going to, I won't even say which fast food restaurant, but going to a fast food restaurant for a treat. And I'm sitting there going, like, you just saw the holistic doctor. You just paid the holistic doctor, and now you're taking your kids to eat not food, is what you're doing. Literally toxic chemical swill is what you are going to feed your children. But it comes on a patty, and we think that it's health food, or we think that it's healthy, and it's not. We need to get back to making our own food, buying clean ingredients, not buying packaged everything, and like you said, really listening to our inner selves. Because, if you subscribe to pure carnivore, pure vegetarian, pure vegan, whatever, but you're feeling less well than you were before, that's a sign, and your ideology might say, I need to eat this way, keto or gluten-free, or all of these things have some value, but is it what your body needs? And working with somebody who can help you figure out what you need, not what their own ideology says, is really important, because you'll also get these people who are so, these nutritional gurus who are so subscribed to their own point of view that everybody needs to eat this way. Are they doing blood work to back this up? Are you getting labs done? Are you doing hair analysis, like mineral hair analysis? Do you know any of these things in order to determine if this is what's best for you? Because I know people who cut out all cholesterol and their cholesterol goes through the roof. And we're blaming cholesterol for something and then taking statins, which are, for most people not beneficial, without understanding what the true role of cholesterol is in the body. So we need to find those people who are doing good current research, those people who are not financially incentivized to come up with the research that they're coming up with. That is a huge thing with science and research these days. These conflicts of interest and financial incentivization. And we need to really learn to listen to our body. But the problem here is, if you haven't been listening to your body for 10, 15, 20 years, when it starts to shout and throw bricks at your head, do you even recognize that's what's happening? That's one of the big issues. The longer that we ignore what our bodies are telling us, the more difficult it is to hear what our bodies are telling us. And the sicker that we get before we even realize there's a problem.
Absolutely. I love that. Another thing you talk about being a midwife is lessons that you've learned from midwifery, and how I guess we can take our power back in a certain sense.
Yeah, so being in midwifery was somewhat short-lived for me, but it was incredibly powerful. It truly is. I mean, birth is truly for me one of the most magical times in anybody's life. Looking into the eyes of a newborn is just, it's kind of beyond all imagining. But one of the things that I had talked with you about was really being present with somebody at one of their most vulnerable times and helping them to stand in their own power. You know, what women are capable of as they give birth is this unbelievable raw power. And when we medicalize the living daylights out of birth, not only are we putting a woman at risk quite often, where it's referred to as this cascade event, where one intervention leads to the next intervention, which leads to the next intervention. And again, there are times when interventions are necessary. Nothing is an absolute. But when you start to intervene with a normal, natural process, not only are you potentially causing harm or risk, but you are also profoundly disempowering a woman in what is probably her most powerful moment of her life. Honestly. I mean, I can't compare it to running a marathon or being an Olympic athlete. I'm sure those women have some really profound physical events that they have to go through. But for most women, giving birth is probably the most profound time where she needs to dig deeper inside than at any other time in her life. And when you take that from a woman, not only do you refuse to allow her to have that experience, but then you're also starting off her life cycle as a mother from a place of disempowerment. And I happen to believe, only because I've seen it for so long, I've been a chiropractor for 26 years. I was in midwifery for a much shorter time, but I was also a doula. So about 9 years in the birth world, and I still dabble in it now. I've come to the personal belief that there is a desire to disempower women and their deep sense of knowing about their children. And that the medicalization of a child's life begins at birth, and they become these perfect customers of the medico-industrial complex, where instead of trusting their own innate capacity to heal, they're again relying on something external to them to heal them. But so much of medicine is not about healing. It's about learning to ignore symptoms. It cuts off our awareness of symptoms as opposed to truly going into the root causes and doing deep healing. And I think for a lot of mothers and children, that starts right from pregnancy and labor and birth. That if instead we can give women, I mean, not every woman's looking for a home birth. Not every woman is looking for a completely natural birth. So we need to allow women to have whatever experience they want to have. But this hyper-medicalization of a normal process, because of fear, again, fear of risk. We have such fear of risk these days that we remove the potential for profound experience in our life. Again, it goes back to even kids playing outside. We are so afraid of stranger danger or a child getting hurt or falling out of a tree or whatever else, that we are preventing children from having these profound experiences of being outside in the natural world, these normal developmental milestones that children hit when they play naturally. And we remove all of that because we're afraid. And we're letting fear run our lives, which is not making our lives better. You know, we can control for so much in our lives these days, in so many different aspects, healthcare, education, government, so many things. But if you look at human lives, are we better off than we were before? Are we healthier than we were before? Are we, when you ask those questions, when you look, are we happier than we were before? So many children are on medication now for all sorts of mood disorders. Are we better off than we were before? I would challenge that with every aspect of my being. And so if we're going this medicalized and technocratic route, but we're not getting healthier and happier, then maybe it's time to reevaluate the route that we're on, the path that we're on. and ask if there's another path that we've gotten off of that leads us on a totally different journey, but one that might actually be more beneficial for us individually and collectively as a species.
Awesome. That makes sense. I mean, I talked about that a little bit here on the show, but great to have someone like you on there and kind of clear things up. So thank you for that. Also, you talked about how we kind of know what's going on with our kids in a sense, right? Because like you said, like the medical system, they kind of they diagnose you, and they don't necessarily kind of listen to you of what's really going on. And I feel like doctors, most of them, they mean well, but they're taught in a system that is kind of designed to keep you sick in a sense. I mean, talked about like Rockefeller medicine before, whole flexion report. I don't really get into that because I talked about it a lot, but basically, like you keep on saying, this coming back to take your power back, and it starts with listening to what is real. And what I like to have sense of in my own life is basically, is this thing pushing me towards growth, or is it keeping me in fear? And I feel like that's part of the inner guidance and listening to that. Like, is this growth purpose oriented, or is it just kind of like, victimhood and fear and this low energy?
Yeah, and learning to distinguish between the two, because excitement and fear can feel very similar in our bodies. It's hard to discern between the two. And so simple things that I would have taught, that I taught my kids, that I taught patients, that I talk about a lot is when you feel that, sense of anxiety or sense of fear, and you're not sure if this is the right path, or you're letting that stop you, is asking yourself, does this feel heavy or does this feel light? Because sometimes, again, you can't discern between excitement and fear. So if you can close your eyes and start to tune into your body, okay, so I'm feeling this. Does this make me feel lighter? Like there's a sense of possibility here, and I'm kind of giddy about it, and I'm a little tingly, and my stomach's feeling a little like, ooh, butterflies. Or does it feel like there's this heavy weight, and I feel kind of sick to my stomach? Sick and butterflies are two different things. And if we can start to discern those things, then it helps to guide us on that right path. It helps us to figure out where our alignment, where that North Star lies, and always looking to that feeling of inner knowing, as opposed to just using our heads. We're so good at using our heads. We're taught to trust this over our hearts or our guts. And so much of our gut is really our third brain. It's where so much of our neurochemistry is actually processed and metabolized. That in itself is another problem, because when children are medicalized from moment one in life, in order to turn them into these perfect consumers for the rest of their lives, we completely destroy their gut health. And I'll give you a specific story. I moved from a major city in Canada to a rural area back in 2011. And I went into a practice that was really busy, and I suddenly had like a massive number of young children sort of thrown on my plate, like, here, you help them. And all of these kids, 5, 6, 7 years old, were coming in with behavioral issues. All of their teachers were like, this child has behavioral issues, they need medication. 5, 6, 7 years old. And I would take a thorough history. What was your child's life like? How were they born? Were they sick? Or did they have any medication? And every single one of these kids, here was the story. First ear infection by 1 year or 18 months old, first round of antibiotics, followed by another ear infection, followed by more antibiotics, followed by another infection, followed either by more antibiotics or a set of ear tubes. First set of ear tubes would fall out, then they'd have another set of ear tubes. Okay, so ear tubes are minor surgery, let's just say, and every single child, every kid. And it came to the point where I said to my practice partner, now my husband, I said, like, I can tell these parents their child's history before they even open their mouths. Now, this was 2012, and I would say to every single one of these parents, did you give probiotics after the antibiotics? And most of them said, what's that? Okay, so if in 2012 you had medical doctors not saying, after we wipe out your gut flora, we need to repopulate it with healthy bacteria, or the few parents who actually were told about this, generally by a nurse or nurse practitioner, were giving a probiotic that was completely insufficient, either the wrong flora or not really meant for children or just not sufficient numbers or something like that. and I knew there was a connection. Gut health, brain health, emotional health. What was it? Around the same time in 2012, 2 universities in the Middle East first found that most of our neurochemistry is actually processed in the gut. So when you wipe out the good gut flora, you're actually destroying the neurochemistry that's needed for not just cognition and learning, but also affect and mood and emotion. But things move very slowly in medicine. So we've known this for the last 13 years at least. And yet so many parents still, there's still this over-prescribing of antibiotics. Parents ask for antibiotics. I'm like, does your child have a bacterial infection? Well, I don't know, but just in case. No, not just in case, please. And then they don't give a probiotic or even fermented foods. Like, please give fermented foods, like, do something. And they don't, or they're completely insufficient. And so we've got a whole bunch of things going on. We've got this nutritional crisis where more foods are processed and filled with sugar and all sorts of things. And kids are craving it, of course, because they're meant to crave these things. These foods are created to create cravings. And then we've got this over-medicalization that's wiping out the gut, affecting the brain. And then we have this reliance on technology that's flying past these kids' eyes at a speed that is not meant for what their brains can handle from an evolutionary perspective. And we're creating these perfect storms. And then you have this fear-based everything around us, this fear-based messaging in the world, so that a child who is no longer, kids should be fully self-embodied. They are so pure in their essence and so deeply rooted and connected to nature and to the world. And instead we're creating these fear-based beings who don't trust their own bodies and are taught that it's dangerous to be outdoors. And yeah, I feel like we're creating this massive mess and have been for probably the last 15 years and a lot longer than that. And there is no way that holistic practitioners and some parents have managed to figure this out, and governments and medicine and education hasn't. And the fact that it's perpetuated makes me feel like it's a setup. It's a setup to keep us disempowered and weaker and fighting with each other and relying on that outside-in authority and medicalization and pharmaceutical everything, instead of raising these really strong, empowered kids and being that throughout our lives. The 2 populations that I love to work with are both raising healthy kids naturally and women's health at midlife. And same thing, women get to midlife and they start to have these perimenopausal symptoms, and then they go through menopause and, the brain fog and the hot flashes and the hormonal changes and all of these things. And what every medical doctor will generally say to a woman is, well, we can just take your uterus because you don't need that anymore. Oh, all right, major surgery, but okay. As though it's, the uterus does not have protective effects in our senior years, which is completely not true. Or there's a provision of hormone replacement, which can be very helpful for women if it's properly dispensed following appropriate lab work, which is not generally done. So it's given as this like one size fits all, which it's not. And at a time where, women in their 50s are coming into probably their most powerful phase of life because they've got all of this life experience, and many of them have raised children and, had these amazing careers at whatever it was that they do, you disempower a woman once again. That, I don't know what to do with your lab work, so I'm just not going to do it, which I heard from so many of my patients that their medical doctor said, or you don't need that anyway, so let's just remove it. So even at that phase of life, there's this disempowering messaging. And it just follows people. It follows women through their lives. But it starts in childbirth and childhood, and it just keeps going. And we are so much more powerful than that. We have so much greater inner capacity than that. And this deep enculturated messaging that we get from everything outside of us, that's that noise that I think we need to shut off. And we need to find our own communities and our practitioners who are willing to support us. There are times, like in your journey, where you do need assistance with good medical care, supplementation, nutrition, all of those things, because you've encountered something in your life that you need help with. But we need to surround ourselves with those people who honor our journey and our voice and our inner knowing, as opposed to this, I'm just going to give you what I'm going to give you. The Flexner Report, we won't go into it like you said, because it's a huge part of our history, and it's not that old. 1913, it was the start of the change of everything in healthcare. But we need to go back to this grounded knowing, and more practitioners, holistic and conventional healthcare practitioners, who are willing to partner with us in our healthcare journeys. Because our health is such a profound piece of who we are as an entity, that if we have people around us who support us on our journey, help us find the root causes of what's going on, and help us find the way to bravely face what we're experiencing and heal that, that changes everything in our lives. Literally everything. And now you start to have mothers and then women at midlife and seniors who are these deep wealth springs of knowledge, these wisdom holders, as opposed to seeing our seniors as being a burden on society. Yeah. We've somehow got everything backwards these days.
Definitely, that makes sense. Something that stuck out to me there is he talked about the protective effect of the uterus. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so the uterus obviously is meant to, allow us to conceive and carry a child, but as we're older, then it also has a protective effect against some cancers.
Really?
Yeah. So if we're removing it, you're removing one of the layers of protection, because truthfully, what happens when a woman goes through menopause is that a lot of the protective effect of a woman's hormonal chemistry changes, and she is at risk of more cancers, cardiovascular illness, all those kinds of things. That's where bioidentical hormone replacement can be very helpful when it's dispensed by somebody who knows how to dispense properly and is looking at a woman's unique chemistry in order to address it. But when we start having a loss of some of the protective effects of hormones, the uterus is still producing chemistry that can be helpful against uterine cancer, ovarian cancer, those kinds of things. And when you remove it, you remove one more layer of protection, right? So now the hormones have changed. You've removed the uterus and potentially the ovaries often. And now we're just exposing women to, and it's seen as normal. It's supposedly normal that women get more cancers as we get older. And there is a shift in our bodies. But why are we removing whatever protective physiology that we might still have?
Definitely, that makes sense. Yeah, we definitely don't want to be removing anything unless it's absolutely necessary, which most of the time, I feel like it's not. Right? So, like you said, keep coming, just take back your power and understand that, most of the time we can actually heal from the inside rather than the outside. So that's an important point there. I know you talk about vibrational and energetic medicine. Is that kind of what we've been talking about in terms of listening to your inner guidance, or is there another definition you have?
No, that's part of it.
Okay.
I think we also, as human beings, have far more capacity to, I think our intuition is incredibly powerful. Our intuition is not, again, some crazy woo-woo thing. It truly can guide so much of our lives. It allows us to, let's equate it to another animal, okay? When you have an animal in the wild, before it even has heard that there is danger, it's already aware of that danger. Its neurology, its sense of smell, it's the hairs on its back, it's already aware of that danger. It's already aware of what's around it. And if you look at most children, they have incredible intuition. They can feel and see things. We call them imaginary friends. Maybe they are. They also have a far deeper understanding of what is around them than we have allowed ourselves to see any longer. We cut off this other sense that we have. But I think that we are incredibly energetically attuned to feel each other, to be aware of the world, if we can learn to trust that inner voice, and we don't ignore it, and we don't laugh at it, and we don't discount it. So, I mean, I'm one of these people who can put my hands on somebody as a chiropractor, as a holistic chiropractor, and I literally see in my mind's eye and feel in my body where something is in theirs. My husband does it by, he can just look at somebody and he hears a tone change when there's something that needs to be addressed. It's literally an auditory frequency change. With me, I can put my hands on somebody and it doesn't come, like, it doesn't just happen. But if I would be seeing somebody that's not getting better, not getting better, not getting better, if I put my hand on them and asked, is there something deeper that I need to be aware of? I have this very freaky, bizarre gift of being able to find cancer. Usually it would be advanced. It wouldn't just be something new and early, but I could literally see it in the body. The number of times that I would have to write a little note on my little pad that says Dr. Marissa Chiropractor and send it back to a medical doctor saying, check this. You know, and of course, they're thinking this loony chiropractor, right? Because there's so much of like, you know, you're not a medical doctor, you're not worth listening to. But this loony chiropractor is saying, and the number of times that somebody would be diagnosed with something that by that point was so invasive, and they'd been ignored, you know, that the first time it happened, some woman had been told that maybe she was having a gallbladder attack, and I put my hands on her and I'm like, oh, that's not gallbladder, that's liver and pancreas, and had to send back a note saying, check liver, not gallbladder. Sure enough, liver and gallbladder cancer. So, you know, how do I do that? I don't know. Other than I allow that division, that separation between the two of us to dissolve, and I just ask, like, can I be shown? And I think, and I'm not special in that way, I think we all have, not that we all want to be going around diagnosing cancer, that's not what I'm suggesting. What I am suggesting is that there is far more that we can pick up and discern if we allow ourselves to drop this like very physical shield that we wear, like, and this belief that we can't feel something energetically or we can't trust our intuition. I think our intuition is our deepest inner wisdom speaking to us, but we have to learn to trust it. Kids have it, and then we stop them from experiencing it. I think our education system and our culture, and I think we stop. I think we stop people from experiencing it and from feeling it. So by the time they're, 10 years old, they don't trust that inner knowing any longer.
Definitely. Something that is kind of in alignment with what we've talked about, and you definitely talk about it, is being in chaotic environments. Like, we have a lot of busy lives, and like, how can we remain calm and like kind of like not just like be in the chaos, but in a sense thrive in it? Because it is difficult to escape them. I mean, challenges are going to happen. That's kind of part of the process. But like, how can we begin to thrive in those circumstances?
That's a good question. And sometimes I think when we are feeling completely chaotic internally, maybe that's the messaging that we need to get ourselves out of the situation that we're in. So we need to figure out, are we just feeling this outer chaos and we have to be in it? Or do we really need to listen to, this is really unhealthy for me right now? Really unhealthy. Like, when we start feeling, I just describe it as feeling off, like your gut is off, your head is off, you feel angry or you feel immensely sad. Asking ourselves what that is and trusting that we need to sometimes remove ourselves from the situation. But how do we calm the internal chaos when we can? I think a few things can really help. I think when you're being in it, just slowing yourselves down. What happens when there's chaos around us is that we feel like we need to match the energy of that chaos. So if there's, now, when we're talking about chaos, we're not talking about trying to escape from the path of a hurricane or a flood. Like, then move. Like, you got to move. But if you're in a situation that doesn't warrant that kind of a response, then sometimes what we can do is even just plant our feet firmly plant our feet where we are, and close our eyes, and just let the craziness go on around us. You can put one hand on your abdomen and one hand on your chest and breathe and focus on your breath and just calm your mind. I'm not talking about meditation because meditation is very hard for people in Western culture. We're not brought up with it for the most part. So trying to say, well, you just need to meditate is really hard. It's a learned skill and it can be learned. But some people for religious purposes don't believe in meditation, and some people just don't feel like they can quiet their minds. But the breath, following our breath, is one of the most powerful things that we can do, far beyond what we understand. And so closing your eyes, planting your feet, and just taking a moment of quiet. It can literally be 30 seconds. 30 seconds. One hand on your abdomen, one hand on your chest. Close your eyes and just follow your breath. You can even check, am I breathing into my stomach? Am I like taking short, rapid breaths? Okay, can you deepen your breath? Can you breathe into the hand on your heart a little more? Can you breathe into the hand on your abdomen a little more? Can you feel like you can balance the breath between the two? If you're not getting a lot of air into one, can you sort of harness that breath from the other place? And feel like you're connected to something solid, the earth. If you're in a building on the 30th floor, it's a little more difficult, but you can still plant your feet. You can envision in your mind's eye, okay, I'm 30 stories up, but beneath me is the ground, and there are trees with deep roots. And that envisioning, that imagining is actually our body's physiology and our energy system starting to reach for those things that are deep and true and patient. You know, trees are one of the best things that we can bring up in our mind's eye, and you envision this root system and this deep reaching into the earth, and we ground ourselves. It's literally called grounding. And we ground ourselves and we slow our respiratory rate, we slow our heart rate, and we slow our brain doing this chaotic, crazy dance. When it does that, we get out of some of that fear. And it might still be going on around us, but we can start to see clearly. When you can flip that switch so you're not in this like massive panic, you can see more clearly. So that even if you are in an emergency situation, God forbid, you know, some sort of disaster is going on around you, we need clarity of thought in order to get ourselves and our families to safety. And if we go into this spinning out of control anxiety, like, I don't know what to do, doesn't help us. If we can just anchor ourselves to something that is stable, makes a huge difference.
100%. Something I like to say is the problem is not out there, it's in you, right? So you have to take control of your inner circumstances. I mean, 'cause that's all we control anyways. Like the outer circumstances, they don't dictate our reality. Like they influence it, but ultimately, if we develop that inner fortitude, like a lot of things we've been talking about here, and also like cold thermogenesis, right? Toning the vagus nerve to be calm under these chaotic circumstances. I feel like that's when life kind of gets fun as well, because, you know, challenges are going to happen, but being able to handle them in a way that serves your purpose, I feel like it's just fun. I mean, it's great.
It's fun, and it also gives us this incredible sense of like, wow, I just did that. Like, I just did that. That was really challenging, but look what I can do. And the more that we experience, look what I can do, with this sense of like wonder and pride and curiosity and like high five yourself, the more that we're primed the next time that we need to do it. Until we start to believe that we are extremely capable. That building that muscle of resilience and capability is so important when this disempowering message around us is you need this external authority to tell you how to live your life, and this external fear is pushing you and buffeting you back and forth. The best thing that we can do is build this internal resilience and capability so that none of us is truly invincible. All of us are going to come to an end at some point. But while we're here, that we feel strong and ready and empowered and in our bodies, totally embodied. Instead of in our brains spiraling, we are in our body and we are anchored and rooted and aligned with a higher sense of purpose, whatever that might be, that changes through our lifetime. And now you become a lot harder to kill. It's like, really, you do. But you have this ability to meet whatever is going to come up in your day or in your week or in your year. Things get thrown at us. There are going to be challenges. There are going to be more global challenges. There's going to be, and again, I happen to believe that those are created. I do. I'm sorry, but I happen to, and we don't, again, not the place to go into it, but that's my personal belief system. And so what we need to do is, how do we respond to those so that we're not being guided by a place of fear and outside in control, that we are being guided by, and we teach that to our children. That is huge, huge, that we create a generation. There are so many people these days. I have kids between the ages of 17 and 27. My husband and I have 5 kids between us. And a couple of them really want children to raise them to be these strong, empowered individual, stand for themselves. And some of them, so many young people that I speak to are like, why would I want to bring a child into this chaotic world? Because the only way that we overcome the chaotic world is if we are raising strong, healthy, empowered, embodied kids. That's how we make a mark. And I don't like combative words or imagery. I don't want to feel like we're fighting something, but that's how we create a better world. That's how we create the world we want to live in. It's not being handed to us. We have to claim it and create it. And I see a lot of people doing that these days. A lot of people going back to the earth and going to homesteading and unschooling and world schooling and all of these things and saying, I am the expert in my life and I am the expert in what my children need. And we are going to create this incredible, empowered society. And the more of us that do that, no matter what your political approach is, no matter what anything else, the more of us that claim this deep strength in humanity, the more we create the world we want to live in. And I think that's such an important task and such an important journey to be on right now.
100%. I mean, something that's coming up for me right now is the power of curiosity, right? Because being open to things changing, like within our own lives, because a lot of us were kind of stuck on these belief systems, and we're just kind of we're stuck, honestly. And just asking more empowering questions, the power of curiosity to, hey, maybe this doesn't have to be this way. Maybe I can shift it. And because sometimes it's too hard for us to believe that it can be all the way, but just opening up the question, taking that first step, I think that's really empowering as well.
I think asking the question, what else is possible? Without looking for an answer. Because our human brains have been taught, when you ask a question, you have to find the answer. Put your hand up, find the answer. Sometimes we just need to ask the question to open the possibility. What else is possible? And you might not know in this moment what else is possible, but if you keep asking it, you start your brain, your heart, your gut spinning, looking for what else is possible. I don't know. And then you start to trust that deep intuition in your body that you know when you're going to find the right answer. Sometimes it's really fast and sometimes it takes time. But when you start to ask, what is my purpose right now, or what else is possible in this moment, you start to feel what those answers are, and you start to be guided by those feelings in your life. And you start to know what the right next move is instead of being told what the right next move is. It makes a huge difference.
It absolutely does. I mean, because another thing that you mentioned before was, listen to people's guidance. Listen to them, but ultimately we have to discern between what is right and wrong for us, because we're the one making the decision. I mean, people mean well, but they're not living our lives in a sense. So just coming back to the internal power and, is this values aligned decision? Is this alignment with what I actually want? So just things like that, just knowing your values and your standards is key as well.
I think it takes us out of being just a bit player in the Truman Show, or a non-player character, an NPC, just walking around living our lives, to being an active, grounded, embodied, you are I mean, the whole idea of control is so ridiculous. I don't know if we control anything, but you are moving with purpose and with alignment in a world that would tell you that everyone needs to be the same, act the same, do the same. We have to start with our own inner healing. We have to start with our own inner knowing, our own alignment, our own purpose, to then be able to move in the world and affect positive change. Otherwise, we have this unbelievable groupthink that's going on these days, and you look at it and you're like, this literally makes no sense. None of this makes any sense. How is this? And it's like people are moving as like some amorphous blob that everyone is just agreeing to the same thing and doing the same thing without there seemingly being any conscious, connected questioning or thought. We don't want to be we don't want to fall into that. We don't want our children to fall into that. We want to be, whether you call it the captain of your own ship or whatever you want to say, where you move with purpose and you're open to change and growth and changing your mind. It is perfectly reasonable to change your mind, to recognize that something that you believed in past or felt deeply in past might have been because you didn't have enough information, might have been because there was a whole lot of propaganda around that and you believed it, might have been because it was what suited you at that time of your life. And it's okay as you have more experiences and more conscious awareness and growth, which is, I believe, we're meant to have throughout our entire lives, that it's okay to change what those beliefs were unapologetically. Whatever that looks like for you. You change your diet, you change your political affiliation, you move, vast spaces, either within your country or out of your country, because things have changed and you're following your inner North Star and what feels most in alignment for you, as opposed to what you're being told you should do. Because how is it that we came to believe that somebody external to us has more authority, knowledge, or experience about who we are and what is best for us than we do? Where did we surrender that power? And we need to take it back. Not in a combative, aggressive way, but in a joyful, curious, expansive way. Curiosity is huge, huge. And we need to be out in the natural world to really experience it.
Absolutely. I love that so much. We talked about it so much in this interview. We talked about your amazing story. We talked about taking back your power, which is a big theme, different health strategies and midwifery. Is there one thing that you love to leave with people to really fortify their own well-being and become the greatest versions of themselves?
Yeah, so one thing that I like to say a lot is you are your own best medicine. We need to start to believe that you are your own best medicine. You are the greatest authority and expert in your own health. And when you can start to do that inner work to find root causes with bravery and courage, because true healing takes a certain measure of bravery. It's not taking a pill or going for surgery or glossing over something and cutting off our awareness of it. Now that I don't have symptoms, I'm fine. Okay. When we start to do that deep inner work, we become our most healthy, powerful selves. And so I'll leave you with the concept of you are your own best medicine. And it's time for us to start getting back to doing the work that needs to be done to rise in that power.
100%. If people want to get connected with you, where can they go?
Best place right now is my website, actually. The site address is elementalhealingarts.life. I've got a very small social media presence, and I'm just about to start a podcast of my own, which will be called Whole Health Alchemy, and that will be on YouTube and typical podcasting channels. But for now, elementalhealingarts.life is the best place to find me.
Awesome. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing all your insights with us. I know people can get a lot of value out of this.
Thank you so much for having me here. It was really enjoyable.
100%. All right. Thank you.